the professional class.
And I can almost see it with the late models going to a super late model and a limited late model.
Or out, whatever.
Whatever the case may be. But the cost.
But here's the other thing, too, is if you start running 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 classes at a racetrack, that's not what you need to build the fan base, build the car count, because if you start running that many classes during a night, well, or you're not going to have enough time during a night. So here's what you have to shrink your schedule down. You're going to have 4 or 5 classes. Now you're taking fans out of the stands.
Or you run a Friday, Saturday, Sunday show, and you get to pick what classes you watch. Chris Frisbee right here says he's high on MCA and what they're doing. Great. Some hate. But they are doing great things to keep the cost down. Sport Mods is growing and a lower budget. Again,
there's another example,
a great example.
And I would debate some of that with Chris, but at the same time, I see where he's coming from, because you go with the 604, the 602 option depending on what class you're in. It makes sense for those cars.
Mm-hmm.
And we start talking about, and we talked with Mike Medell, A mods versus B mods, IMCA modifieds versus sport mods. Lap times are right about the same.
Yeah, but it goes right back to what you just said, though. How many times have you seen A mods and B mods run the same time, or the same race, the same night? Not very often. You have to figure out how you're going to condense that all into a show.
Exactly, and that's where, and you start talking about running a Friday, Saturday, or a Saturday, Sunday. Now you're doubling your operating costs.
Yeah. Can you double the crowd?
Exactly. So it's really like running 2 nights back to back. You're adding a night to the season, but you're also adding cost to the season. So you want to offset that percentage. Let's condense it down a few classes, get more butts in the seats in the stands, and have more fun.
Valid point. I understand what you're saying.
Let's go back to the days of alphabet soup for late models every week at Willamette Speedway.
Or you start your show like we used to, qualifying at 2 o'clock, have your classes, and roll them off.
Be efficient.
That can be done.
Methodical.
You could have 6 classes a night and have no problem doing that.
What time did you get done that night when we had 6 classes? The night before championship night, it was like 9:30?
Something like that. But going back to the cost, what do you have to do? You guys want to call in and talk with us. The phone line is open, 503-862-3478. Let us hear from you. I want to know what you guys would do. The drivers. I'm talking about drivers, team owners, whoever. If you're heavily involved in the game, I want to hear you talk about what you do to control the cost before it gets so far out of hand it ruins the sport. Because we've seen it happen. Mm-hmm. Indy cars, remember what happened with Indy cars.
There was guys that could build those in their backyard.
And
they did in the early days. And actually, one of the street rod builders, John Butera, did it in the 80s. He went bankrupt doing it, but he did it.
Right.
But that was one of the last backyard builders of any Indy car in that era. But now there's no way anybody could even fathom the idea of building an Indy car.
Right now, unless you've got a multi-million dollar budget, you can't even think about
a research center and tunnels.
Wind tunnels and carbon fiber, to make your own car. It's so... That level of racing is just absolutely ridiculous.
It's astronomically, it's untouchable.
It is.
But you got to think, back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, guys were building those in their backyard.
Right.
Not necessarily backyard. They're probably the upscale
shops.
But
then in the mid-90s, the mid to late 90s, we saw Indy cars the cost got so outrageous, it nearly destroyed that entire level. The Indy cars were almost non-existent. They split into 2 series. We saw the Indy cars and we saw the IRL, the Indy Racing League, and it was so bad. They lost corporate sponsorship. You started seeing sponsors on cars you never heard of. That it was so bad. It was so bad, and I think that I don't want to see that happen with any level of motorsports ever again, especially at our level.
Yeah,
here on the dirt tracks. Joel? You're in the parts business now. What does a guy have to do? What does a sanctioning body have to do to control the cost? Because guys Penske's going to build shocks. We're seeing shocks. That's the biggest thing guys complain about right now is the cost of shocks. If you don't have those $6,000 shocks,
you're not competitive.
How do you compete with the guy that does?
You don't need $6,000 shocks. Number one.
But
hang on. Where you run into the problem with people going out and buying $6,000 shock packages or spending $10,000 on a shock package. Do you really know what you need for shocks? Do your research. Find the product that you need for your car, for your driving style, and then bolt that on your car. Don't sit there and go, oh, Dom's running a tubular, high zook tubular upper, so that's making him fast.
Yeah.
My car needs it. Don't go doing stuff like that. Learn your car. Learn what you know. Learn your car. Figure out what you need on that car to achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve. Whether you're loose on entry, loose on exit, I can't feel my right rear. Those are all possibly setup issues. So,
unless we weigh the same, we have the same identical car and the same identical everything. Unless you're not comparing apples to apples.
And I think where the biggest problem from everything I've seen, the biggest thing out there right now is that people are not playing with their ballast enough. They don't know how to ballast their car and balance their cars. Because you talk about the pro circuits. What kind of change are they making? They're taking a 5-pound piece of lead and moving it from a high position on the car to a low position on the car. Okay, you're not changing your corner, your weights.
You're changing the roll center.
You're changing roll center.
Right.
And you look under most of these cars that we have out here, I'll be up front, every car that I've crew chiefed on, the lead that you have on that car, that I had on that car, the smallest chunk was like 25 pounds.
Right.
Why didn't we have, and I look back at it, why did we not have 5-pound chunks? Why did we not have 10-pound chunks? Why did we not have 15-pound chunks? Where we could sit there and have stuff bolted where I could just drop it, change the roll center like there. Because we all know, basic setup, you move ballast depending on what kind of track you're on.
I want to read something that came in here on this Rear Trekking chat line. Again, Gray Ferrando. Listen to this idea. He says, in late models, my opinion, would be 525 crate engines, reduce the aero package, narrow the nose, lower the deck, which also improves safety, small spoilers, keep the weight up, keep allowing adjustable shocks so you don't need to have 20 in the trailer. Some of that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, you're not going to get everybody to agree to that all the time. You're not.
I'll tell you.
Jason Figure says, hey, we got to get the noses off the ground. You want to keep these cars, he talks about sealing them off like they do at the NASCAR level. You see these cars, the way the noses are cut from the right to the left.
We tried that
at the angle, and they're sealing the cars down to keep the aero on top of the car to keep the downforce, which makes traction. Yeah, it makes traction. We've seen everything.
Well, and here I want to go off what Gray said. 525 with a 8-inch spoiler, 10-inch spoiler is what the rules package was this year, if I remember correctly. 604s had the 12-inch, and you had an open motor with an 8. My personal opinion, if you want to change the game of racing right now to make it more quote-unquote cost-effective to keep the cost from rising extravagantly and rapidly, take those spoilers, everybody gets an 8-inch. Because here's the thing.
I will agree with you on that.
Here's the thing.
I already know where you're going.
Everyone gets an 8-inch because I'll tell you what, I have seen no more, in my opinion, when you start throwing a sealed crate with added aero into it, okay, you're giving an advantage, number one, an aero advantage to the ones with the crates. But also, you have the guys that are going, okay, we all have the same motor. What can we do to get more horse out of the motor? Because we all know that, you take a crate, a CT525 and a CT525, they're going to have similar horsepowers.
Right.
So how do you free more horse out of that car? Well, you start talking about lubricants. How can I decrease my parasitic my parasitic load? How can I, pump more fuel down? So then you start seeing $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 carburetors. You start seeing guys running, lighter and lighter oils. You start seeing low drag serpentine systems on these cars. You start seeing high zook bearings in the rear end.
Right.
So really, is a crate cost effective? I'm going to call no.
Well, okay, in theory, yes, but like you just said, everybody's going to do what they have to do to get the advantage, and guess what? The next guy's going to do it, and the next guy's going to do it. It's going to go on down the line till everybody's doing it, and now you're back to where you started from.
Whereas if you take that aero advantage out of there, you take this 2-inch spoiler away from the modifieds for the 604, you take the added surface area on the spoiler away from the late models, guess what? You have the option. You run a crate or you run an open.
So here's an interesting comment from Chris Frisbee. He says, disagree. If you don't reward those people for purchasing to lower cost cars, you have to buy big motors to keep up. Chris, I will totally disagree with you on that, because if you look at what Joey Tanner and Brian Cronk and Colin Weinberger did with 525s this year against open motors, that theory goes out the window.
And I would take that a step. I wouldn't go that far. I would not go that far because they had an aero advantage. I would go back to not...
listen, I'm going to argue with you on that in a good way. Okay, I'm going to argue with you because I'll tell you right now, and maybe it's got something to do with the talent in the wheel, I don't know. But you take those 525s, I'm telling you right now, you take Colin Weinberger, you take Brian Cronk and Joey Tanner, you put CT 525s, and you put them in a feature race like they had this year against the open cars with an 8-inch spoiler, and I'll tell you right now, those guys are still going to go to the front like they did.
I would not disagree with you. But at the same point in time, what I'm saying is take the best example to use for a crate motor versus open motor argument is to go back 2 years in the IMCA modified division when we had no spoilers for crates, no spoilers for the opens, no weight difference. You had to weigh 2450 either way.
Right.
And it was all about ballast on the car. That is where you can see you can have in my opinion, a fair comparison because you're on the same aero package.
Same tires.
Same weight. That's where you can have a fair comparison. Where if you start saying, and I agree with you, Corey, Brian Cronk, Joey Tanner, Colin Weinberger, Trent Elliott.
Right.
Those guys are going to go towards the front regardless of what they have underneath the hood.
Absolutely. 2 inches on that spoiler.
But 2 inches makes a huge difference.
I know it does. But on a track that let's use Willamette Speedway for an example. Even on a track, now if you're at Eldora, that 2 inches is going to make a really big difference. If you're at Willamette Speedway, it's not going to be like it is at I'm telling you right now, that 2 inches, you can shake your head.
I'm going to shake my head at you.
I will argue this point with you because I'm telling you right now, there's only so much you're going to put on the ground.
I will agree with that.
Whether you've got a 10-inch spoiler or an 8-inch spoiler, and if you've got 950 horse on a dry slick track, and you've got what's a CT 525 putting out?
450.
No, more than that.
550.
Okay, so you take a 900 horse engine with a 10-inch or with an 8-inch spoiler, okay, and you take a CT 525 with an 8-inch spoiler, and you put those guys on a dry slick track. I'm telling you right now, that CT 525 is going to perform every bit as good as any open motor.
I'll tell you.
You're only going to use so much power. If you've got all that power and you can't hook it up, I don't care who you are or what kind of talent's in the seat, you're not going to the front.
It's your turn for the debate.
I know. Dom's our moderator over here. He's sitting here pointing and going. But no, I wish for our fans they could see us in the studio right now because Corey and I are standing up. We're really getting ready to yell at each other.
No, I'm not yelling. I'm liking this discussion.
Here's the thing, though.
I want someone to call in 503-862-3478. I want to hear you guys talk on the air. Let's get this discussion going.
Here's the thing, Corey, and I will. You brought up an excellent point there. You have a 900 horse open motor versus a 550 horse crate motor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I agree with you. There's only so much you can do to put that power to the ground. Here's the thing. How far does the throttle pedal move on a 900 horse motor? Oh, crap.
All right. I love it. See? Who is it?
This is going to be fun.
Who is it?
Northwest Dirt News, you're on the air.
Oh, man. Tanner, hit me up. Talk to me about this, bud. Yeah, I love it. Tell me what your opinion is on this deal. Am I out to lunch on this? Am I out to lunch with my opinion on this deal? Talk to me. I want to hear what you're thinking on this 525 versus the crate and the rear spoilers. Talk to me about it. Oh, Joey. Okay, so here's what I want to know. I want to know your opinion. 525 versus the 900 open motors with, a 434, whatever it is. Talk to me about your opinion and hooking these cars up and the performance of both those cars. Am I out to lunch on saying what I said?